and good to go.
I just said all that without being live.
No, you did. I just was confirming.
All right, sorry.
All right. And then I wanted to make sure that y'all had time to look at the minutes from last time as well. And if anybody had any questions.
Well, I won't say all of it again, but okay.
Yep. No, we're all right. So with that, I'm going to put up the 4 questions that we sent in advance. Good to see everybody tonight. So while that comes up, these are the last 4 of the questions that the mayor shared with the Police Advisory Board Development Task Force. And so we've been working our way through these questions, and we wanted to hear everybody's feedback related to the questions. And so I won't read them all here, but I'll just read them one at a time as y'all discuss them. So up on your screen should be the 4 questions, and the first one is what is an ideal composition of an advisory board? Size of body, range of backgrounds, affiliations, community representation, rotation of members, etc.
Do you want us to start with that one?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started with that one.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments? I mean, I thought what the committee put together was fine. The only thing I would add, though, is, you know, I was really wondering why, and Sherry may be able to answer this, but I mean, personally, I can see some benefit if a police advisory task force is formed, or when it's formed, that it would have, you know, at least one or so persons who may be retired from law enforcement or something like that. So I don't know what the committee thinks about that, but I think, you know, having some insight like that would be helpful to a police advisory committee, I would imagine.
I don't disagree. I certainly think that, you know, I don't think there should be anybody that has current or recent ties at all to the Athens police force, but someone who might have experience in law enforcement in another town, or, you know, decades before. But definitely that also should be someone who has a clear record of community involvement as well. You know, I mean, I believe that in order for this body to function well, it has to have a really clear understanding of policing, and it also has to have buy-in from a broad and diverse swath of the community. People need to trust the decisions of the board, you know, and you know, it can't be something that appears to have any bias one way or the other.
Yeah, good points, Melissa. Tim?
Yeah, I would say I understand the reasoning behind the recommendations, asking for them not to have them as a official member, but in my mind, I thought of it completely made sense to them to have somebody from the police or retired, something like that, as an ex officio who could give that experience, give that background, answer questions, kind of like we have, right, with staff representation and constantly, and a lot of other committees have too. But just wouldn't be necessarily a voting member of that. And otherwise, you know, I agree. Oh, the other thing is, I know there's some very specific asks for some of the appointments from organizations, and I know that Sherry's memo went into the problems with that. And I know we talked about it, but with that part, I think that part should just be where those are recommendations to have that kind of representation there. This is something that we can strive for when appointing that committee, but not a necessity.
That makes sense. Like maybe, you know, in the calls, the public calls for members, make it very clear that we're striving for members that represent those particular community groups or demographics.
Yeah, and I will say this though too, you know, certainly what we're doing and what the committee did was to make some recommendations to the mayor, and at the end of the day, it's his decision about who would be, I guess, ex officio or not. But I do think some sort of background knowledge about things in law enforcement would be helpful to a committee, and also give what Melissa was talking about, the sort of make sure everybody sees it as being fair. Sherry or Russell, did you have any comments, or Sherry, do you have any comments about this?
I don't have any comments beyond what was already in the memo, as Tim mentioned. So, sorry, as Commissioner Denson mentioned. So I think I would just leave it all to you all as to what you want to see, and then we're happy to craft that.
Okay. Well, let's see what question number 2 leads us to. So, what training and knowledge are critical for advisory board members to have? I mean, we kind of touched on that a little bit just a minute ago. So, I mean, certainly. Certainly, I think some training is going to be necessary. I don't know what that is, though. Police chief may be able to help us with this one, and Sherry as well.
I mean, I suggested before that I think it would be crucial for everybody on the board to go through that Citizens Police Academy. From what I understand, is a pretty in-depth program, and gives you a lot of insight into the department, and provides folks to do ride-alongs and stuff like that. And it's a program that's already in existence. Otherwise we might have to set up a whole new specially tailored training program, whereas that existing program might be what's needed, and maybe some additional seminars and stuff that would come from the Justice Reform.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa. That makes a good point. Chief, did you have something you want to add there?
Yeah, I think I agree with Commissioner Link, and also I think it would be beneficial for us to have some training where a lawyer, or it could be from the police department, but it doesn't have to be, would come in and talk about case laws, and guiding principles as far as how police departments operate and work. And then I would certainly volunteer my staff and would want them to get some training on finding the information that's available and already there, because we have a robust transparency website and information that they can get at, but a lot of people don't use it. So those two entities I would recommend.
Russell and Tim, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have anything to add, please jump in.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said so far, and with what the chief brought up, I think is definitely important as we've gone through with handling potentially some sensitive information at times. I think some training on open records and all that kind of stuff, and why maybe some of the ways that we're going to be operating, we are doing that, to have an attorney really spell that out. And then the last thing I would say would be to try to see, I'm assuming that NACOL does some trainings. I am not sure, but it seems for us to look into that too, to see if they have some training stuff that we could be utilizing for them. But going back to the knowledge or critical training, for the most part, though, I think this just needs to be engaged residents. Again, going back to diverse, but who are going to be able to really pick up stuff and be trained as they join this, like we have a lot of other ones. So I don't think this has to be like a board of experts or anything per se.
Right. Okay, well, it does seem like this one was an easy one to answer, that we all agree that it does need to be some training and something available for board members to access from that standpoint. So, Josh, let's I guess so. We'll park that one in the little parking spot there, and go to question number 3. What level of information access is necessary for the advisory board to provide ideal service? I mean, we kind of talked about that in just a few minutes, just with number 2. Anybody have any thoughts on that? I don't really at this point in time, but I might.
I mean,
what level of information access, what level of information access is necessary for the.
yeah, it's just more like a records request.
Right. So Sherry may have to help us with this one. Sherry, do you have any? Sherry and the chief may have to help us on this question.
Yeah, no, oh, sorry.
No, I was just reading the question again, but go ahead. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. I think the question's a little bit unfortunate because I think it would be really easy to say, well, what level of access is necessary? Well, complete access. The problem is that's just not realistic and probably not legal. I think one of the things we've talked about in the past is that there is a good workaround, which is that if, the auditor, monitor, whoever the main staff person is who's involved, if that person goes and reviews records at the police department rather than maintaining them themselves or having possession of them, that kind of is a workaround. But there's still probably going to be at some point records that are part of an ongoing pending investigation that are very sensitive, that really just cannot be released to anyone in any way, shape, or form without possibly jeopardizing the investigation. And so I think that to answer this question, part of what you all need to decide is how you want this board to operate. Is this just reviewing those kind of internal affairs style complaints that are going to be over relatively quickly, usually within a period of months? And then you would, anybody would have the right to access those within 10 days of the closure of that investigation? Are we talking only about totally closed cases, which again, anybody would have access to? Or do you want, is the goal that this person could try to respond to some extent in real time? And then in which case, it's more going to be about the auditor, monitor, whoever that is, going and viewing things. So we could say access in terms of viewing things, it can be pretty broad. Access in terms of possessing things probably can't be very broad.
And I think here we were just talking about not any auditor monitor, but the board. But I guess it's kind of the same situation.
Mm-hmm. Right, and then the challenge then is if you have a board. I can't speak for the police. I can imagine it could be really disruptive and really difficult to try to have presentations for a group of 6 or 12 or whatever it is to come in to see evidence on a regular basis. So it may mean more that it would be appropriate to have like one designee or a staff member, like the chair, who does that and then reports back verbally in some way to those individuals.
Right. Okay. We'll hit on that in just the next iteration of this agenda.
I envision, Mr. Chair, I envision the auditor monitor being the person who would be viewing records or being present during any sort of internal affairs interview. I think that might be a more tenable starting point, just to keep it as tight and close as possible to protect the integrity of the information, protect the integrity of the investigation. I think if we go down a road opening up the possibility of board members and citizens viewing police records while pending investigations are going on, that's a bridge too far for me. I'd rather us start with exploring how an auditor monitor could possibly be present and then report back to the board.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I agree with Russell. And I mean, that's kind of what the recommendation had here. They would be reviewing reports conducted and completed and compiled by the auditor monitor position, and reports that would already be taking in mind the legal constraints and complexities for the situations.
So I guess the answer to number 3 is what level of information access is necessary would be any information that's available to anybody after those 10 days or something.
Well, I think it would be. I think it would be.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure, Chief.
Yeah, related to that. So access is one thing, but further divulging is an area where I'm a little concerned about. So we've got an active, ongoing administrative investigation. certainly if the auditor monitor wants to see stuff and better understand what the issues are and how the investigation is going, but we don't want to jeopardize the ongoing investigation and have information going out beyond him until the investigation is completed. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I was referring to what Sherry said, that after any investigation is complete, it's open to the public after 10 days. Is that right?
Well, and just to be real clear, I mean internal investigation. I don't mean a criminal investigation.
I got you. Okay.
What I'm saying is on an administrative investigation, I think the value of having the auditor or monitor there early is as the investigation is going on, he can kind of be watching over, seeing what's going on, and attesting that we're doing we're following right procedures and we're working on the case. But they wouldn't be able to then go back and release information until after we finish the case and after that time period expired. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, I envision the auditor monitor reporting back to the board and something to the effect of, yes, I've been present at these. I've been present for interviews and these portions of the investigation, and my determination is that it's going well. Everything's fine. Yeah, not divulging sensitive information or details.
It sounds like we're pretty good to go on number 3 then, if that's the consensus of the board in that way. So we'll stew on that for a minute, put it in that parking area.
Could I try to clarify that, maybe to summarize?
Sure.
So if this is what I'm hearing, it sounds like we want the board or the auditor monitor to have access to any records that any member of the general public would have access to. But for things that would normally be kept confidential, we want the auditor monitor, staff member, whoever that is, to just have access to view or to be present, but not actually to have those records or to divulge anything that they're not given permission to divulge. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Chief, is that what you're hearing?
That's what I was thinking.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Good. How about number 4? What level of staffing and budget is necessary for the advisory board to provide an ideal service to this community? I guess I don't know just yet. I mean, I don't. It's hard to determine. I mean, I guess we could base it on the caseload of what was it, 40 to 60 this year. But
Chair Hamby, didn't you mention something about a contract started out as a contract position as needed?
Well, that could lead us to the number 3 question on today's meeting: discuss potential for an on-call administrative officer to serve versus ACC government employee. Sherry, did you want to address that for us, and maybe we can get this one off the docket?
Do you mean the number 4 or the contract employee question?
Well, we're going to talk about number 4 in the context of number 3, which is what Josh. We're on the agenda today to discuss potential for an on-call administrative officer. We're kind of continuing the discussion we had last time about how that auditor monitor position would look.
Yeah, I think what I would just say is that I think these are policy decisions. I don't have any legal concerns about whether this is a full-time staff member or some sort of contract employee, particularly recognizing, as you said, that there are a really small number of internal complaints. So I don't think any of us know really what an auditor monitor's job is going to look like on a day-to-day basis and how much work there might be for that person. So I don't have any legal concerns though about it either way.
I have a question. I was unable to make the last meeting, but was there any discussion about the independence of that role and how that might be maintained within the structure of the government? It occurred to me that if that position were placed within the actual Office of Operational Analysis, that independence possibly could be maintained. And it's also kind of in the same vein in that, they would have investigatory powers and experience.
Well, and that does, and we did discuss that, Melissa, and it did bring up the situation where that does broaden the charter responsibilities for the auditor, which then would have to go to the legislature for some.
So does the charter specify the staffing of our Office of Operational Analysis?
It doesn't specify the staffing, no, but it does specify what it's yeah.
It's not. So like having a specific staff member who's primarily focused on the police department would be in violation of the charter. Is that correct, Sherry?
Well, I think what we had talked about last time is that it would be fine under the ordinance that describes the auditor's duties to provide this duty or to make this duty a part of the auditor herself or his, in the future himself's job. But you wouldn't be able to add a sub position under the auditor because that would violate the charter. And I know that sort of sounds like we're splitting hairs. But the same argument would be that, Judd is the county attorney as a charter officer. You couldn't put this under the attorney's office because it's not part of the charter that this is any of his responsibility. So it is, I'm not sure if I'm speaking that very clearly. I guess what I'm trying to say is we can't create sub offices of charter officers because that is not in the charter. We could give the role to that person, but the question is then, are they able to continue doing their other obligations?
Well, could could it be a staff position in the auditor's office and the auditor themselves would actually be the supervisory over that position?
Right. I think what we would say is that it certainly could be that the auditor is responsible and then one of the auditor's employees ends up doing a fair amount of the work. But it could not be that there is now an auditor monitor who works underneath the auditor. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just thinking a position something like assistant to the auditor for police oversight or something like that.
Well,
no, but that's what Sherry's saying. We can't create a new position. We could put it within. Sherry, are you saying basically
the charter
you can
says we only are because
Sherry, hold on one second, Commissioner. Sherry, you're saying that we can add to the job the job duties of the auditor's office, and should that workload increase, then the auditor would assign those duties to an employee.
Sort of, yeah. So under the ordinances, under Chapter 1-3, so not in the charter. That 1-3-1B it sets out the specific duties and responsibilities of the internal auditor. So we could.
Could change that.
We could change that. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The problem is I think it needs to be really clear that it's the auditor serving in this function. So maybe an assistant helps her, but it's still the auditor. Sort of, I'm an assistant to Judd, but I'm still not the county attorney. I'm still not fulfilling that role independent of his supervision and his leadership. So another way of thinking about it is we couldn't take something that is currently under the manager's office and put it under the attorney's office because we just think that would be a better place for it because that would violate the charter.
And Melissa,
I hope that helps.
One of the other options that we discussed was a position, an on-call position similar to what Denny Gallis provides us with administrative hearing officer. It's more of an independent person, and he's called into action when needed.
Mm-hmm.
For those, and so maybe one of the things to consider is a recommendation to the full mayor commission that maybe we just look for somebody like a Denny Gallis that could serve in that on-call capacity and elevate it to the administrative hearing or administrative officer for police services or something like that. So Go ahead, Tim.
The issue I guess I have with that is that, I mean, and the way I've been thinking about this, and honestly, I think the way a lot of the community who've been wanting this have been thinking about this, is it's going to be the work of that position is going to be much more than just the formal reacting to investigations. And if we look in the recommendation, that is one bullet of 5 bullets, in which the other things are reviewing police policy, which would be happening year round, ensuring that procedures are being done correctly, throughout, again, year round, making policy recommendations. I think the big part is conducting community outreach with public meetings, presentations to community groups, going to events. I think this should be basically a kind of big. You're right, because the beginning of this conversation was all about trust. We're trying to reinstill trust in our police force, between our community and our police force. And I think that's just going to be something much bigger than a contracted individual like Denny. I have never interacted with him over the years that I've been with this mayor commission, and I think we need somebody that has a lot more engagement with us,
Tim,
and also with the community.
I wasn't suggesting Denny, but Denny has.
Oh, I know. I wasn't saying that you were, but I'm saying that just to show you the disconnect between a contracted individual who only comes in when needed during certain specific incidents, and somebody that I think we need to have on the ground year round doing a lot of work.
And then the third option is with the Safety and Justice Committee that's been set up and started. There is a FTE allocated to help support that and all the other work that comes from that we've mentioned in past meetings that could potentially fulfill this role too, as we better understand the workload associated with it.
Right, and that may be an option as well. And I guess to committee and Commissioner Denson as well. A lot of the stuff described in the report is also, is the job of the police chief. I mean, so we've got to take that into consideration as well. I mean, an auditor monitor position, who, if it were described like that, who are they accountable to? At the end of the day,
I guess the board, right?
Well, but if they're
to us,
if
the
they're
board, and then to us, right?
They're looking at policies and procedures of the department. We're kind of, I don't know. I think there's more questions there.
I think one thing that I don't think we necessarily have delved into enough, which I think is the crux of this whole thing, right, is that, again, that lack of trust, and I think people in the community wanting to have a different inlet to what's going on with policing outside of specifically the literal police. And so I think this would be working right in parallel, like what the chief would do and stuff. I mean, I guess in my best perfect world, I would love to see, we have some event going on. The chief is there, plus the auditor's there. Like, they're both there, right? I mean, but I think it's very intentional that this is being asked to be something that is very different and separate from the chief or any of our police officers.
Well, let's see what Sherry has to say about this other question. So the attorney's office provide guidance on the auditor monitor's access to confidential police matters and board membership preferences.
Sure. So in terms of the auditor monitor having access to records, I mean, I think it's what we've basically already discussed, that if it's something that can be accessed by the public, which is quite a lot, then there's no issue with that. It's all of the confidential things, which unfortunately are going to be, and everything that's generally pressing, exciting in the news, the things that we probably most want someone to be able to respond to are going to be usually the most confidential. And so that's going to take some work with the police department to figure out how that access to those documents could work. I will say one of the things that Judd and I looked into was the issue that we don't believe that the mayor and commission has the authority to force the police department to provide those records. So it definitely would need to be a collaborative effort with the police department and the manager's office, but I have no reason to believe that Chief Sproul wouldn't want to cooperate with us. I mean, he's been participating with this task force for over a year now, trying to be cooperative. So I think that we could come to a really good agreement, and probably what we would need is some sort of signed confidentiality agreement and some really clear guidelines, maybe even individual forms when the auditor monitor comes and witnesses, for instance, an interview or something else that's confidential, or reviews certain confidential information, to make it really clear what that person can or cannot share about what they observe and what they hear. So that's kind of what I'm envisioning, and that doesn't need to be worked out now, but that would be something that we would need to develop as a process moving forward for this group to be successful. Does that help answer your question on that?
It does, Sherry. Thank you. Melissa, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm still kind of stuck on this idea of this position being under the auditor's office, and I understand that some auditors' offices do have a specific public safety investigator position, or a position that specifically deals with public safety. I'm wondering if staff could possibly look into that. I want to just consult with our auditor. She's done lots of research into the structure of other audit departments, and see what that looks like, and see if we could come up with something that might fit our charter.
Melissa, I'm going to ask you to do this if you don't mind. I don't know when your next audit committee meeting is, but maybe have this discussion at your audit committee meeting.
Okay, I'll ask the auditor to bring some of that information.
And I'm not suggesting that this committee will go in that direction or not, or any direction just yet, but just to gather more.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about, the independence of the office, as well as Commissioner Denson pointed out, the importance of maintaining a constancy of that position.
Well, and also, I understand, I hear that, and I don't disagree with that, but I'm also concerned as well about accountability and how who that auditor monitor answers to. The mayor would forward and go from there, but at some point, it almost seems like we have two police chiefs running around.
Well, this would be someone who just focuses on investigations, I would think. But I'll bring it forward to the audit committee.
That's not what's being said. That's the point I'm making.
I'll bring it forward to the audit committee and ask the auditor to bring us some examples from other communities on how this kind of thing functions within that office in other communities.
If it is, as you say, just functions on investigations, then I think it's a pretty simple solution, I believe. But from what I'm hearing Commissioner Denson say, it's a little bit broader than that.
Yeah, well, there's definitely some outreach functions. But yeah, I'll bring that forward to the audit committee.
Okay, Russell, do you have anything to weigh in on here? I thought this would be an easy task, and it is. It's moving along, I think. We're having a good discussion, and we're getting somewhere, I believe. I hope y'all do. But Josh, what do you think?
I think that as we get closer towards defining the duties of the auditor monitor and how they'll interact with the board, I think it'll help clarify what sort of position we should allocate to accomplish those duties, whether it's with this safety and justice task force, this other FTE already allocated, or other alternatives. But like you said, Chair, I think we're moving along.
Okay, so Melissa, you will engage the audit committee on this question, and I'm not asking you to spend a whole lot of time on it. If it's all right with you to engage them and just see what since y'all work with the auditor closely, that would be a question they would need to ascertain if that's something they want to do to broaden the auditor's position. Josh, next steps for us and maybe you, and do you have any idea there?
This has been a helpful conversation, and thanks for the feedback, everybody. I think Commissioner Edwards was onto something. I think the next step is really for y'all to define the duties of this role. And one thing that Sherry and I will do in the lead up to the next meeting is develop kind of a decision matrix or decision tree for y'all. Y'all have talked through all the questions that the mayor provided the task force, and we've heard your responses, and we're going to try to kind of draft a matrix that kind of shows the different things you said on each of these questions, and then you can kind of go through and decide in that decision matrix kind of what you think. But I think the core of it is kind of defining those duties, as Commissioner Edwards said, and I think that's where the majority of the next meeting will be.
Okay, maybe we can have some sort of virtual sticky note meeting. We put our
There's software platforms that we can use. Oh yeah, don't tempt me. I'm ready.
Found them, I'm sure. So y'all love your sticky notes. Board, is that all right with y'all? I don't want to do.
Sounds good.
So.
Also, if I remember correct, and this might be helpful to Commissioner Link's discussion, that if I remember correct, Sherry had a memo that talks specifically about the difficulty of why we couldn't put this in the auditor's office, if I remember that correctly. So I think, reviewing that part, that really made it clear to me, because that was also the way I wanted to do it, the way Commissioner Link's talking about, but that memo made it much clearer.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
And I can try to resend that out.
Thank you, Sherry. That'd be good. I have trouble finding emails these days. I have trouble with a lot of things these days. But board commissioners, any other further business? If that's
Nothing for me, Mr. Chair. I'll make a motion to adjourn if no one else.
Second.
okay.
Great.
Thanks for y'all's time today. I appreciate it.
Good night.
Thank you.
All in favor?
All in favor.
I take that as unanimous. All in favor to adjourn. Thank you.
Unanimous consent. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Have a good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good weekend.